And I was going to wait for Will, but I think we'll go ahead and get started since we're already kind of racing a little bit and we only have until 9:50, 9:55 at the latest together. My name is Carol Mills, and I am an associate professor in communication studies. And this year I took on the wonderful task of being associate dean for undergraduate studies in our college, which is the College of Communication and Information Sciences. Anyone here in communication? Nobody. They all must be in the other session. We'll get them next. I went ahead and started. Is that okay?
Oh, sure.
Okay, terrific, thanks. And so last year was the first year I had the opportunity to do this session, and I loved doing it because I got to see all of these wonderful fresh faces that will be out doing a lot of our teaching in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And so welcome to the University of Alabama if this is your first time here, and if you are continuing, glad to have you continue on with us. So real quickly, show of hands, how many of you are going to be running your own courses? You're not a lab instructor, but you are. Anthony, you're in our college. I see one now. Okay, I'm sorry. So how many of you are going to be running your own classes? Okay, so you're all responsible for your classes. How many of you are lab instructors? Okay, so almost half and half. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today will span both issues, or both roles. But we'll concentrate towards the second half mostly on running your own class. But even if you're not doing that right now, don't disregard that information because you may need it really, really, really soon. How many of you are master students? Wow, the majority of you. Okay, how many of you are doctoral students? Okay, so a little more on the master side. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to do today is just do a quick overview of what this quick little session will look like. And we're going to discuss your role and your goals as a GTA. We're also going to explore some ways of interacting with your students and your colleagues to enhance the teaching and learning experience. Can everyone hear me in the back? Okay. When I say teaching and learning, a lot of you are probably thinking, I'm going to be the teacher and they're going to be learning. One of the things I ask you to do is dispel that myth right away. Because one of the things that you can do to be a really, truly effective educator is to recognize that you're going to be learning the entire time as well. And in fact, one of my favorite professors of all times, who was at Purdue and is now at Ohio State, on his syllabus, rather than putting instructor, he was very hippie. He would put co-learner. And now that never would work for me because I couldn't pull it off because I'm just not that cool. And he would also bring his guitar to class and play. But the idea of it has always stuck with me, that I embrace this entire experience of teaching, not just as disseminating information, but learning with the people in our classes. And if we can do that, it makes for a much better environment for our students because they don't feel like we're coming in as a dictator to teach or make them do things. But it's also a better experience for us because we can recognize that we're human and we're here to grow and learn the entire time. And I think one of the worst things that we can ever do is start treating our teaching experiences like a job we don't like, right? Like it's something routine. And so I encourage you to kind of embrace this notion that you are both teaching and learning simultaneously. Next thing we're going to do is understand the basics of effective syllabus creation. And we don't get to spend nearly as much time on this as we'd like, maybe 2 minutes. But there are tons of resources online that we'll talk about and tons of resources for you to get from your department or the course coordinator, and we really need to be making sure that your syllabi are effective and ready to go. And then at the end of the session, you should be able to identify what your personal goals are as a GTA, know how to create a syllabus, understand the importance of planning and preparation, and most of all, be more confident when you walk into that classroom. How many of you are going to be teaching for the very first time? Okay. How many of you have taught before? It looks like the majority of you have taught before. Okay, good. So there's some experience in this classroom. And so look around and draw on the people around you as well. Because there is no one right way to do this. And by getting a multitude of experiences and opinions, you can develop your own style more effectively. Okay. Especially for those of you who are new to teaching. You may be asking yourself, where do you fit at the University of Alabama? Why they chose you, what was expected of you, what you expect of yourself, and how you manage it all. Right? Some of you may even be thinking, and I'm guessing there are some of you in here, thinking, oh my gosh, I tricked them. They should not be letting me get a graduate degree, and they certainly should not be allowing me to teach, right? That is called the imposter syndrome, and it is incredibly common. And so if you are feeling that, if you look around, I see some of you laughing because you know you have these moments, right? If you look around, you realize that other people are feeling the exact same way. This is a new experience for many of you. Some of you, it's the second part of a teaching experience. But where do you fit at the University of Alabama? Bottom line, graduate students are central to the mission of this university. When you pull up to the University of Alabama, if you're on over by Rite Aid, right on the university, you see that beautiful sign that says Teaching, Research, and Service. Teaching is what all of you are going to be doing. And this university takes that incredibly, incredibly seriously. And so I'll be honest with you. I started here this is my 9th year here at the University of Alabama. And the population has grown substantially since I started here. We were about 15 to 16,000, maybe 18 when I first started, and now we're somewhere around 35,000 students. And I would have never thought that this was a place I would want to teach because I love working with students. Students energize me. I love my research, but teaching makes me happy. I walk into a class, I love my students, I love watching them learn, I love learning with them, and when I leave, I feel better than when I went in. And so for me, teaching is just core to who I am and what I do and what I love. And with 15,000 students, I got that experience. And now at 35,000 students, I probably would have never applied for a position here because I would have thought that the students would get lost here and the students wouldn't matter. But one of the amazing things about this university, and one of the reasons that I have not even considered leaving, is that as the university has grown, they have made sure that they have invested right back in the students and right back in the resources and right back in the teaching. And so we have grown the faculty, we have grown the graduate student population, and then we have wonderful resources for the students like the Teaching and Learning Center. And so students tend here, undergrads, not to feel like numbers who get lost the way you would expect on a campus of this size. And you are central to that. When you think about it, how many of you are teaching courses in the 1 and 200 levels? Raise your hands if you're in the 1 and 200 levels. Look around. That's a huge portion of you. So what does that mean for our students? What does that mean? Yes, right, we're keeping our classrooms small, right, whenever possible. Absolutely. What else does it mean? Exactly. You are on the front lines. The students who are going to have you, many of them won't know anything about your disciplines when they walk into your classrooms. So you are going to be their first exposure. And in some cases, that is the most critical exposure. Whether they love the subject or whether they hate the subject, oftentimes will be predicated on what happens in that first year or first set of classes. So your role is critical. Don't ever feel like, well, I'm just a graduate student. I'm just a GTA. No, you are a graduate student and you are a GTA, and that is critical to how students see this university, to how they see their major, to how they see the discipline, even if it's a social and behavioral or humanities requirement. It's critical to their experience, and so you are central to that. So embrace that and be proud of it. You were chosen because your department, college, and graduate school wanted you here. This is not something that you just got because, you happened to be in the right place at the right time. You were recruited, you were valued, they wanted you here. But the reality is how many of you are working other jobs? Anybody else have other jobs? Some of you. How many of you have romantic partners? Quite a few of you. Anybody have kids? Wow, quite a few of you. Huge contingent back there. It's like the kid contingent back there, right? How many of you plan on conducting a pretty significant research program while you're here? Raise your hand if you want to do some research while you're here. Okay, good. Right? And I see in this contingent, we've got a lot of parents who are also practicing research who have romantic partners. Right? And some of you are fresh out of the University of Alabama. How many of you are straight out of the University of Alabama yourself? Several. How many of you are straight out of undergrad elsewhere? Right? And so you're going to have your own set of challenges, right? Because we're learning how to balance these multiple roles. We're all still students, right? So you're going to classes, but you might go from a class to then having to be a teacher within 10 minutes. And you're going to have to make that mental mind shift of, wait, I was just a student, now I'm a teacher. I was just a teacher, now I'm a student. Right? Your research role, your roles with your partner, if you were a parent, learning how, if you were at the University of Alabama, people who see you as a student, as a fellow student now might be in your classes, right? So you're going to have to balance all of that. And that is something all of you need to be thinking about. Do not take for granted the fact that you have these multiple roles to balance. And here's the thing that a lot of us never want to talk about. You're probably not going to be perfect at all of them. Get over that. You're going to have to prioritize. You're going to have to figure out how you need to organize your time and how you want to invest. And you have to recognize that sometimes the ball is going to get dropped on some things. And you're going to have to figure out when and if that happens, what things are most important to you that you are not going to let go. And not beat yourself up when that happens. Now, you can do all the planning in the world and hope that that doesn't happen, right? And we'll talk in a second about that. But if it does happen that something has to drop, know ahead of time what that's going to be. So for me, I'm a single mom with 3 kids. Bottom line, if they're sick and I have an article due tomorrow, back to an editor, am I going to take care of my kids or am I going to take care of the editor? My kids. And if I have promised students that I will have papers back on a particular day and my kids want to go to the park and play, what am I going to prioritize? No, if I promised my students that they're going to get their papers back and my kids want to go play, I might have to say to them, hey guys, we can't go play today because I promised my students that they would have their papers back tomorrow, right? And so, I have to think about that. And sometimes do my kids get a little annoyed with me if we can't, run to Vestavia Bowl and, play for 2 hours when I have papers due? Sure, they might, but they also have to understand, right, that any time that I have, we have lots of fun time and lots of playtime built in. And they also know that when they're sick, I drop everything. Okay? So you need to think ahead of time about what those priorities are going to be for you. Okay? So then the next piece that I kind of hinted at is organization and time management. And people beat this into your head, and the bottom line is experience is the best teacher here, but I cannot get on you enough about this. I cannot tell you how many times graduate students have come into my office and said, oh my God, I'm teaching in 45 minutes and I don't know what these terms mean. Or I'm teaching in 45 minutes and I don't have an exercise to do and I don't have enough. You're teaching in 45 minutes and you don't know what you're going to be doing, right? Well, why not? Well, I had these papers to do in my graduate seminar, and I had this happening, and I had to work, and I understand that. Once in a while, that may happen. But the best thing you can do right now is look at your entire semester and try to lay that out, right? If you have your textbooks and your reading materials you're going to be teaching from, read them more than a week ahead of time, especially more than a class ahead of time, right? Know what's coming down the pike. Line up all of your dates. Figure out what you are going to have to do as a student and then what you are going to have to do as a teacher. Remember when you are making assignments, right? When you're getting overzealous and you're giving your students tons of writing assignments to do or tons of assignments, that you're going to probably have dates that are about the same for your graduate seminars, right? And so think about how you want to organize what you're going to have due for your students versus what you're going to have due as a student, right? So think about some of those things ahead of time because there's nothing worse than having, a stack of 50 papers to grade or exams and have to be working on your own paper or exam that is due at the same time, right? So really kind of think about that ahead of time. Recognize these last 2 things. You're going to screw up, and that's okay. You're going to make mistakes. And, sometimes you're going to let something fall. You're going to have to go and ask for an extension in a graduate class, which they never love, but, right, better to do that than do something really goofy like plagiarize or, things that hopefully graduate students never do, but occasionally we see those cases. Or, you will promise students papers back and you didn't get them on that time. Or you will be unprepared for a lecture, or an exercise won't go as needed. Sometimes you make mistakes, and that's okay. Don't beat yourself up over it. Don't cry in front of your classes if you can avoid it. Every couple of years, I'll have someone come into my office, and sometimes it's a colleague, not even a graduate student, who'll go, oh my gosh, I completely lost it in class, I started to cry. And it's both males and females, so don't be going, ha, these women. No, I've had males do the exact same thing. They're like, I got so frustrated I started to cry in front of my class, or I lost it and like yelled at them, right? Don't, that is not the place for the emotional venting if you can control it, right? Because sometimes I think when we get to that point that we want to yell at a class or, cry or whatever, it's because we're really frustrated. And if we recognize that we make mistakes, we can also sometimes recognize that other people make mistakes as well. So kind of let that roll off if you need to. And then also, don't ever be afraid to seek help, ever. It's one of the reasons I love this university. Seek help from your fellow graduate students. Go talk to your professors. Even if the professor who's running the class isn't the most helpful for you, go see another professor. Go see your advisor. We have an amazing faculty resource center and a center for teaching and learning excellence. We have a fantastic counseling center. And some of you, if you're in psychology or sociology or communication, you might go, oh my gosh, love the counseling center. And some of the other ones might be going, really, I don't need counseling. It's not just about necessarily personal, traumas. The counseling center can be great just for helping you balance your multiple roles when you feel like you're exhausted and fed up and stretched too thin. So, look for help in all different kinds of ways. And maybe your help comes in the form of exercise, right? Maybe you're one of those people that needs to exercise 4 or 5 times a week. If you do, don't let that go, right? Keep yourself balanced. Okay. My few little communication people in here will know what I'm doing here. And if you're in sociology or psych, you know this as well. But sociologist Irving Goffman talks about the fact that we have our self. And our self arises from interactions with others, and that we're constantly managing the impressions we make on other people. And so one of the things that you have to figure out is, who are you going to be in this teaching role? Who are you as a teacher? Right? And some of you might already know who that's going to be. But we need to recognize that there are at least 3 primary things that you have to have. Okay, and we'll talk about the other stuff in just a second. But above all else, if you have these 3 things, you will be managing your impressions well with students. Not every one of you is going to be the most popular GTA on campus. Some of you may not even want to be the most popular GTA on campus. Popularity is not the same thing as helping students learn. And students don't get fooled by that for very long. I have students in my office all the time, in my new role as Associate Dean for Undergrad Studies, who want to talk about problems they're having in their classes. And 99% of the time, it comes down to one of these 3 issues. They don't believe that the person who's teaching is very knowledgeable. And here's the funny thing. Oftentimes this comes from professors, full professors, not necessarily GTAs. But it happens when they feel like they've asked a question and the professor has gotten contentious with them, right? They don't expect you to know everything. If you don't know the answer to a question, to say, gosh, I don't know, but I'll look that up. Or that's a really interesting question. Why don't you let me research that and get back to you? That is a knowledgeable answer, right? Knowledge does not mean you have to be the encyclopedia of your subject or, outside of your subject. But you should at least know the material you expect them to know, read it ahead of time, know it ahead of time, be able to discuss it. And when you don't know, be able to say, gosh, I don't know that answer. I'll get back with you, right? Fairness. How many of you have been in a situation where you feel like a professor or an instructor or a teacher at some level was not fair with everybody in the class? Many of us. Does it ruin the whole experience? Yes, it does. You have got to be incredibly careful about perceptions of fairness. Being a capricious teacher is the fastest way to make your life and your students' lives unhappy. Right? So you need to be thinking about treating everybody equitably, which means you might really like a particular student, and you know that that student has been struggling, and they come to you and say, may I please have extra credit? And you really want to give that student extra credit because you really believe they've deserved it. If you decide to give that student extra credit, what do you have to do? Give it to the entire class. You have got to remain fair and impartial at all times. If you are teaching a lab or a class that requires assignments to be graded, if you are having them turn them in with their ID numbers and not their names, students feel much more confident that you're grading them in an unbiased way. If you're grading them on Blackboard Learn, you can grade them without seeing the names of the people that you are grading. It also gives you more confidence that you are doing things fairly and equitably. So think about those kinds of things. Most of all, be organized. And I'll be honest, this is one of my biggest weaknesses. It's something I still struggle at 43, almost 44 years old. But it's the thing that when I'm not organized, I can tell by looking at my teaching evaluations over the last 20 years. Even if I had a great rapport with my students, even if I think they've learned a ton, I can always see a huge dip in my evaluations in the semesters that I am not organized. If a student asks me for something and I can't find it, or I don't get papers back on time, or I come to class and I'm digging for things and I can't get the computer to work because I didn't set things up ahead of time, or I think, oh geez, I should show this clip. Oh, let me search for it online now rather than having it already ready. Even if everything else in that class is perfect, when I am not organized, I see that dip. Why do you think that is? I'm sorry? Yes, and what do they observe? If I'm not organized, what are they thinking? Exactly, that I didn't plan ahead of time, which means I didn't care enough about them, that I did not respect their time and their work enough to be organized. So, they think, well, you expect me to turn things in on time, but you don't have to turn them back on time, right? Or you expect me to cite my work properly, but then when you're lecturing, you don't even know where your slides are, or you have to dig for things, right? So we need to think about that. That organized component is incredibly important to students. And so, unless you really think you can pull off that nutty professor disheveled, thing that would be so endearing they would overlook look it all, you're best off being very organized. Okay, but then, so we have those three things that are givens and should always be givens. But then there are other things that are negotiable in teaching, right? So some of the factors that you guys are going to have to deal with are your age and your credibility. Bottom line, I can't lie to you about this. When I first started teaching, students would challenge me so much more than they will now, right? When I've been teaching, it actually started teaching 20 years ago this year. Never thought that would happen. But my first year teaching, right, when I'm like 23 years old, grad student, hi, I'm Carol Mills, and I'd like to teach you. They would challenge me all the time, right? And they would ask things like, well, can we just move the midterm exam? Well, the midterm and the paper are really close together. Can't we just move those? And I would want to be nice, and I would want to be cool, and so I'd say yes, and as soon as I did, what would happen? They'd ask for something else. Right? And then pretty soon it went from 5 papers to 3 papers, and we doubled the grade on this one. Right? It became a nightmare, right? But my age was part of it, right? They saw that I was really young, and they thought I can pull this over, right? But I realized some of it is also that I never bothered to truly establish my credibility in the classroom. Right? Like the way I comported myself was probably more like, hi, I'm Carol, I'm a GTA, so nice to meet you all. I want to be your friend, and I want us to learn together, yay, let's go, right? And I didn't pull on the credibility I had. And one of the things that all of you are going to have to think about is how are you going to introduce yourselves to your students on the very first day? Because that first few minutes of that class will set the tone for the entire semester of how they see you. And so, a lot of times people will give you the advice of go in incredibly strict and then get easier as you go if you want to, but set that tone of at least being serious and professional that first day. And you do not have to tell them that you were a graduate student. In fact, I would not tell them that you are a graduate student. Because as soon as they hear student, whether it's graduate or undergrad, they think, oh, you're a student like me. So you are best off thinking about the credibility you have and coming up with a way to introduce yourself that does not have, and I'm a student. And so you say, what is your name? Jenna? Jenny. Jenny, and what area are you in?
Kinesiology.
You're in kinesiology. Master's or PhD?
Master's.
Okay, so rather than saying, hi, I'm Jenny and I'm in kinesiology and I'm so excited because I just graduated 6 months ago and now I get to teach you all, right? No, right? Hello, my name is, what is your last name, Jenny?
Jensen.
Jenny Jensen. Okay, so, and you can decide if you want to go by first names or last names. That's an entire preference. Generally, the younger you are, particularly female, it helps to go by your last name, but you don't have to, right? But so even if you say, hi, I'm Jenny Jensen, I would prefer to be called Ms. Jensen, or you can call me Jenny, whatever. I am here to teach this course, right? And then think about the credibility you do have. So rather than saying I have an undergraduate degree, and you can say I have a background in blank, right? So I have a background in movement studies and this and that and blah, 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 blah. My research lies in the area of, and as soon as you say your research interest, and if you're going to be a master's student, right, or a PhD student, you have some kind of research interest. My research interests are in the areas of, Jenny, what do you plan on doing?
Like exercise and teaching.
Okay, so my interests are in the area of exercise, science, and teaching pedagogy. Right? That is enough, right? If you already have a master's degree, you might want to say, you know, my master's degree is from, you know, University of Alabama or University of Florida, University of wherever, and add that to your credibility. But students aren't going to key into what you haven't said. They're going to key into what you do say. So think of ways to build your credibility with your teaching, your research. Even if you're a graduate student and you've taught before, you can say I've been teaching, you know, I've taught several courses before. I've taught blank and blank and blank. Right? Never, whatever you do, say, this is the first course I've ever taught. So if you guys paid attention, right, we just ended Shark Week. As wonderful as our students are, it is natural for people to key in on those kinds of things, right? So think about your credibility. Then you have to figure out what style do you really want, right? So I want all of you for just a quick second to jot down the teachers you've loved, what they did well, right? What you liked about them, and the teachers you dreaded. What were the qualities they had that you dreaded? So just quickly try to jot down some of those things. What were some of the things that you loved, and what were some of the things, if you dreaded them, that you didn't like about them? And I know we're racing, and I'm sorry, we just have such limited time. I'd normally give you more time, but what are some of the qualities of professors or teachers that you've loved? They seem to care, be willing to help, and how might they show that?
Availability.
Ah, availability, yes. Have office hours and keep them. You know, show up to class a few minutes early so you can greet them. Be willing to stay after for a few minutes if you can. Invite them to your office. Anthony.
I think the quality of being demanding but fair.
Yes.
Goes a long way because it helps you feel intellectually challenged, but it lets you know the professor or the instructor cares about you and wants to help you sort of work up to the material presented.
And Anthony, that's one of the most important lessons I think that as educators you can get through is that, you know, oftentimes the inclination is I want them to like me, right? The goal shouldn't be to get them to like you. The goal should be for them to learn, right? And they may love you in the process, right? But the goal should be to be challenging, demanding, not unfair, not unreasonable, right? But their goal is to learn. And believe it or not, you know, and some of you who are straight out of undergrad know this, the classes that were the easiest weren't necessarily the classes you valued the most, right? Oftentimes we went, that was a waste of my time. Right? Have all of you had that class where you just went, wow, I really just spent that much money and that much time? Right? And you might have loved the professor, went, wow, he was really cute, she was really cute, they were really fun. Did I learn anything? Would I suggest that class to other people? Would I give them a chili pepper on Rate My Professor? Maybe. But that's not what we're here for. Yes?
I think honesty and not insulting people's intelligence.
Yes. Right?
Treat them like an adult. Treat them like they want to be here and they want to learn. And be honest. Don't, act like they're doing great if they're not. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Be honest with people, right? And treat them like adults. And as some of you who are really young have experienced this, and those of us who are a little older have watched it. This generation is very different in terms of education because they want to be adults, they want to act like adults, they want to be treated like adults, but even their parents haven't necessarily given them that freedom yet, right? And so they're really kind of caught between those worlds, and so, one of your jobs is to bridge that and treat them with the respect of an adult and let them kind of grow and learn and be honest when, they need that honest feedback. Anything else about professors you have enjoyed?
I've always enjoyed professors who were excited about what they were teaching and
Yes.
showed that they loved what they were teaching.
Yes, right? If they like the material and they're excited about it, it makes us more excited about it, right? And so even as an undergrad, I had a class I did not want to take. I will tell you right now, in English, people don't get mad at me, but it was feminist literary criticism. And why I decided to take the class, it fit my schedule. That's why I did it, right? But I really just dreaded that class. And when I saw the book list, I went, oh. But I had this woman, Sherry Benstock, and she loved that material. When she read excerpts from it, her eyes glistened, right? And to be honest with you, is why I ended up going to graduate school. Not in that area, but I thought if somebody can love what they do that much, I want that job. I want a job that I can love that much, right? And I found my area. But, being passionate really matters, right? And even if it's a subject you're teaching that you go, oh, do I have to teach this one? Remember that it fits into your larger area and find what about that is interesting and good for you. What about some of the things you don't like?
Ego trips.
Ego trips. What do you mean by that?
They know everything, you know nothing. Abuse of authority.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And that's an incredibly important one because as we talked about at the beginning, right? Like you have to balance, right? Being a teacher and being a learner. And when you make rules and you follow them simply for the sake of following them, even when you realize that there's a legitimate exception, right? It may make you appear to be unfair, to be on an ego trip, especially if you start arguing with students, right? And so when we talk about syllabus creation here in just a minute, your syllabus needs to be very clear in your expectations, right? But you should also always have a flexibility clause in there that says, if things need to be changed, right, we will change them and all changes will be posted in Blackboard Learn as well as sent through email and let them know how, if any changes need to be made. Because sometimes, especially when you're first teaching, you might need to make a few changes here and there, right? Same thing with attendance policies and sick policies. Do not make an attendance policy that says there are no excuses ever and if you miss, you can't make anything up ever. Is that reasonable? No. And will that get overturned if the student goes above your head? Absolutely, right? So you need to have a reasonable attendance policy that says you have this many excused absences or this many unexcused absences, and if you want the absence excused, here are my requirements for documentation, and let them know that up front. But saying no absence is excused ever, right? That's not going to work. Or, your makeup work, makeup exams, makeup papers, those kinds of things. To say you can never make up work, right? That's not going to work. If they have legitimate medical excuses, you need to allow for that. What else did you not like? Yes?
Teachers who were too lenient.
Yes?
I didn't like teachers who let students kind of take over the class because I would see the students abuse the power.
Right.
So sometimes it would get crazy, or if I had a teacher who said that a paper was due on a particular day and I worked really hard to make sure that I submitted it that day, and then the other half of the class didn't submit it, and the teacher's like, oh, give it to me next week, and then I get angry.
Yes. What is your name?
April.
April. So think about that, right? I mean, several of you may have been in that situation, right? So you have a class, you have a paper that's due, let's say it's a Tuesday, Thursday class. On Tuesday, everybody's whining because they don't have the paper ready for Thursday, and they go, oh, please, 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 can we have an extension? You might think, well, geez, is it power hungry to require it to be due on Thursday? But if it's on the syllabus, if they've known ahead of time, you've got to respect the fact that those deadlines were set up ahead of time, and you're penalizing then oftentimes the students who did the work on time. So you're penalizing and potentially alienating the very students who you don't want to alienate, right? So once you have syllabus dates or expectations, think about how that may affect the class dynamic, not just the few that want the extension, but how it may affect everyone else. Right? Anything else about the teachers you dreaded? One last thing. Yes?
It was a microeconomics class, but the teacher, black and white presentation, sat in his chair the whole time and just read through, and that kind of ties in with being enthusiastic.
Yes.
But
Exactly. We dread it when it's so boring that our head hurts, right? And so here's the thing, and we're kind of running out of time, but you really need to kind of think about your style, how you want to do that, right? And all of us are going to do it slightly differently. So here's the reality. No matter how hard I tried, I could not be a completely serious person. And one of my favorite professors in the entire world was incredibly serious, loved his material, let you know it, but never cracked a smile. And I can't do that. I'm just kind of goofy by nature. Right? But I also know that I can't be completely goofy in the classroom, right? And you have to figure out what that style is. Not all of you are going to be incredibly energetic all of the time. Some of you are more laid back. But embrace that. And it doesn't mean that they can't see that you're enthusiastic about the material, right? So think about how you want to present yourself. Remember that you're teaching students, not material, and that will get away from the boring, like just reading of things, okay? Learn their names. Even if you have a class of 200 people, it really isn't that hard, right? And to be honest with you, it pays dividends for the rest of your life. They will know you, they will remember you, they will come to you, you will be forging great relationships. And do all of you know that all of the rosters, you have picture rosters online in MyBama? Do all of you know this? Okay, in MyBama, yes, log into MyBama, and under the faculty tab, you'll see class rosters. And there's also a picture roster. Look at it before the first day of class. Now, sometimes you can't always tell people apart from their pictures, but kind of look at them. Erica and Jenny may look alike in their pictures, but then in real life you can tell them apart, right? But, look at that picture roster. It really will help. And if you have a small class, if you have less than 100 people, there's no excuse not to know their names, period, okay? Eye contact, mind your nonverbal cues. Always leave time for questions and discussion at the end. Don't change your syllabus without proper reason, right? Be friendly with students and not friends. And for those of you who are new to campus or are continuing on campus, here's the ugly little secret. You need not be hanging out at the Houndstooth. I'm sorry. It stinks. But if it's an undergrad bar and you know that you've got a lot of students who may be in there, don't go. There are some places that if you want to go and hang out are more graduate student and adult oriented. What are some of those places, guys? The Alcove, right? Downtown, the downtown pub, wherever. Find the places where graduate students are hanging out. Resist the temptation to hang out with your undergrads. You're only going to get in trouble doing that, right? Game day, that's different. All bets are off. Everybody's in the Houndstooth, whether you're 70 or 7, but, well, not 7, but, but be mindful of that, right? And remember this goofy little phrase. When you get put into a corner and you're thinking, like, I don't want to be unfair, right? And students say, we have a test in 2 weeks and we're not sure we're going to cover all the material. Can we please change it? And you know that maybe you should. Don't ever feel like you need to give everybody an answer immediately. You can always say, let me think about that and get back to you. Let me think about that and get back to you. Should become part of your vocabulary when students are asking you questions. And it'll affect your credibility and help when accommodating special requests. Okay. Gosh, that extra 5 minutes. Okay. A good syllabus. For those of you who are creating your own syllabus, bottom line, a lot of you feel like students never look at syllabi until they're in trouble. But that's because we're not doing a good job designing them. A well-designed syllabus is something that students will, can, and should be using. And so it provides a vision and rationale for the class. Right? Students should know from your syllabus what the class is genuinely about. Not just what the course catalog says, you need that in there, but basically what do you really want it to be about? What are you expecting of them, right? You also should explain to them the knowledge or the rationale for the logic of the course. So why is the class the way it is? Because sometimes we don't understand. Now, to be honest with you, a lot of times you'll say, well, it's because the textbook goes from chapter 1 to 12, and I'm going from chapter 1 to 12. But there's a reason textbooks are designed that way. Think about what the logic and rationale is for the way the course is lined out. So if I'm teaching relational communication, I might say we are going to work through relationships from early childhood through, teen relationships, through adulthood, and finally into elder relationships. Why? Because that follows the lifespan. Let people know a little bit about why the course is laid out the way it is, so it doesn't seem random to them, because quite frankly, if we don't put a frame on it, they might just go, well, geez, we're learning about, these chemicals and then these chemicals and these chemicals, but they don't see a reason for the pattern. So lay that out for them. Provide students with very clear expectations. Remember when we go back to being organized? This will help you as much as it will help them. When you design your assignments, at the exact same time, decide how you're going to grade it. Do not design an assignment and say, this sounds like a great assignment, and then you give it to everybody, and you get them all back, and you go, how am I going to grade this darn thing? When you are designing the assignment, decide how you're going to grade it. Because then you know what you expect from them, and students want to know, what is expected of me? How many of you have ever been given a paper and go, I don't really know what the teacher expects? Right? Well, they can't know if you don't know. Right? And that's the reality. So figure out what you expect, and then if you want to, you can put it in the form of a rubric, right? Even if you don't give it to them, you will have it for yourself, right? But if you can give them a rubric or some basic guidelines for grading, it will help the quality of their work, and it will make your life significantly better. Because as we've talked about, if students know what's expected of them, they will live up to those expectations. They can't live up to expectations that they don't know about. So the more specific we can be, the better. Right? Discuss and define the mutual responsibilities of the course. So basically let them know you're committed to them. Here's the thing. Nowadays, students expect a response to email within 5 minutes. I'll be honest. There are times I cannot get back to students until like 12 hours later. And so I will say, if you email me, please know that I will get back to you within 12 hours, right? Or if you email me in the middle of the night, maybe 24. But give them an expectation rather than I'm going to be on my iPhone all day long and respond to you immediately, right? So give them those kinds of expectations and allow them some, high degree of personal control over their learning. So, let them see how their involvement will affect the class. And know that a syllabus will serve as a contract for that class. Once you give them the syllabus, which should be on their first day of class, not the first week, the first whatever, technically maybe it's the first week, but they want it on the first day. They deserve to have it on the first day. You should be organized enough to do that. Give them that syllabus, and if you have like a flexibility clause in there that things may change, if you change it, let them know ahead of time. Did I have a question? Okay. Okay. Online, when you go into my Bama, there is OIRA Resources. Does everybody know about this? Okay. Bottom line, the university requires every single person who has their own syllabus to upload it online. And we are going through SACS reaccreditation this year and next year, and SACS will want everyone's syllabi. So you can build them right online. So you go to my Bama, you look for the OIRA link. It looks somewhat like this, right? When you click on it, it'll tell you what your classes are, and you can build your syllabus. Okay? There are several requirements on that syllabus. Okay? The prerequisites might already be preloaded, depending on your area. Right? You put in your course descriptions. You put in your objectives, an outline of topics, your attendance policy, the planned number and timing of major exams and assignments. Right? And again, be as specific as you can. I know that sometimes professors will say, we will have an exam in midterms, and sometimes around final time. Put the dates in. Students need that information ahead of time. Right? What your grading policy is, the policy for making up missed work, and any required text and course materials. Okay? And make sure that those required texts are on there, because especially for athletes, unless it's on their syllabus, right, or people who are on scholarships, they cannot get those texts unless it's on their syllabus, right? And so make sure that anything, and so even if you say, oh, these are just suggested readings, put them under required readings, and then maybe put an optional next to it, but if it's not under required, those people on scholarships can't get that material, okay? So again, go into my Bama and look at all of those things.
So the disability and weather clauses are automatic?
There is a disability and weather clause automatically in there, yes. Yes, so should automatically be in there. Double check, but they should be there. Okay, very last thing I think that we have time for today is before you design your syllabus, design your class. Spend an hour or two thinking about what your vision for the class is. Oftentimes people will make the mistake of sitting down, starting to write a syllabus, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, without thinking about what do I really want my students to get out of this class. At the end of this semester, what are the most important things they should take away? Right? And design the course that way rather than starting with your textbook, right? So think about it. Think about who your students are. Do you have mostly majors or non-majors? And if you're teaching a class that's mostly non-majors, might you teach it differently than you do majors? You should. You should, right? Because their level of interest and their level of background is going to be different, okay? Think about their backgrounds and prior knowledge levels. Think about all the resources you have on campus. Find out ahead of time. What are your departmental resources? What are the university resources? What media do you have in your classrooms? Go check out your classrooms ahead of time. Walk to them. Look at them. See what they look like. Okay? Your course content, and then your learning objectives, and we've kind of talked about that. Okay, day one, as we just talked about, visit your class ahead of time. Make sure you go and know what it looks like. It should not be the first time you go in. Okay? Bring your own markers if you do have whiteboards. They have legs. They walk away. And so don't expect there to be markers in there even if there were any the day before. And some of my students know that I'm constantly saying, does anybody have one? So I've had to like start taking mine. Right? Know how you're going to distribute the syllabus. Blackboard Learn is the easiest way. Students expect everyone to be using Blackboard Learn. Be prepared like we talked about with your introduction. Right? Even if you have a syllabus, still put all of your key information up the first day of class so they can see it, whether you put it up on a big Blackboard slide or on a whiteboard, whatever. Get them involved immediately. Right? Talk to them that first day. Don't just lecture at them. Ask them a few questions. If you like cheesy icebreakers, I love cheesy icebreakers. You can do cheesy icebreakers. If you're not a cheesy icebreaker person, at least ask their names. Right? Ask them about their prior experience, something to get them talking. Or have them write things on note cards. And this is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give you is on the first day, even if you're tempted just to take roll, read the syllabus, and let them go, don't. Give them a small content introduction that day so that they know what the feel of the course is going to be like. So no matter what class I teach, I generally start with a 10-minute lecture on what is communication or what are the components of communication to give people a sense of what that class is going to feel like. Because quite frankly, we have some people who aren't sure if they want to be in there or not. They're not going to know unless you give them a taste of it, right? It also sets an expectation that you're going to hold class and not let them out, right, halfway through every single time. And finally, say goodbye to them as they're leaving. Let them know that you're looking forward to them. So say, hey, thanks for coming. Look forward to seeing you next week. Not just race out of the class before they leave. Okay? Make sense? Okay. So we didn't make it through everything because we started a little late, but do we have any questions? I'm happy to answer anything if you have them. Great. Well, thank you all very much, and you can head on to your next section. Thank you.